All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our third webinar of the year, which is fixing the streaming video ad problems. I think this is going to be a really great webinar. We've got some fantastic panelists to talk about what some of these technical challenges are and, providing ads within streaming video. Quick introductions. I am Jason Tebow, the Executive Director of the Streaming Video Alliance. If you don't know who we are, the website's at the bottom of the screen. Check us out. Great opportunity for companies from across the ecosystem to come and collaborate on solutions that everyone can use. This webinar is being recorded. We will post the recording on the Streaming Video Alliance website probably later this afternoon, at which time we'll also socialize that so that colleagues who are unable to attend can come and watch the recording. They'll also receive an email, anybody who's registered, with a link to the video. All right, with that said, let's introduce our panelists. So we'll start first with Chris Hock from Adobe.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, all. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Chris Hock. I head up our product and business development for Adobe's sell-side advertising and video solutions. This includes our primetime dynamic ad insertion, our video player products, and our advertising data solutions. I've been involved in streaming video for a number of years since the inception of Flash Video back at Macromedia, and spent about a good 8 to 9 years in TV advertising before returning back to Adobe.
Fantastic. Dave.
Hi, my name's Dave Romrell. I'm an engineering fellow at CommScope, and my focus has been advertising, streaming video, pay TV solutions. CommScope is a leading provider for schedule-based advertising to the set-top box for decades. In the last 5 to 6 years, we have had a IP linear addressable solution through server-side ad insertion, which is in use by some of the largest video service providers. And today we are helping our customers bring together these solutions, schedule-based, linear, VOD, live, all under one system.
That's awesome. Thanks, Dave. And Sudhi.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Hi, I'm Sudhi Nada. I'm the Senior Director of Product at Conviva, where I head up our advertising analytics products. I've been working in the advertising space for 7 or 8 years now, at Yahoo, a couple of startups, and now at Conviva. Conviva, we track billions of videos for most major premium publishers today. Anybody that does streaming uses Conviva for measuring video. And a year and a half ago, we introduced Ad Insights, which, in addition to tracking videos, tracks the video ads that run within those videos. So the direction we're going is providing our customers a comprehensive view of videos, ads, and their viewers, so that they can make more informed decisions and ultimately grow their business.
Fantastic. And then last but definitely not least, we have Amit from IAB Tech Labs.
Thanks, Jason. I'm Amit Shetty, and I lead the video and audio initiatives at the Tech Lab. In the past, I've worked at I've been leading product teams for a variety of companies, worked at Yahoo and a couple of startups as well in the space. For those who don't know, the IAB Tech Lab is an industry org that focuses on advertising standards. We are probably responsible for a lot of the acronym soup we use in the digital ad industry, like VAST, VPaid, OpenRTB, Open Measurement, all those things. But I like to look at us as the folks responsible for making sure that all of the systems talk to each other in the ad tech space.
What a fantastic idea, interoperability. So that actually leads me to, to sort of the first question for you guys. And maybe, Amit, maybe this is actually a perfect place, to land in your lap. But, obviously, inserting ads, measuring ads, dealing with advertising in streaming video is complex. It's, a lot of different systems. Can you talk a little bit about from your perspective, and then, everybody else can add their perspective as well on what do you see as the major technical challenges for integrating advertising into streaming video?
Sure. So I'd say that the technical challenges fall in a couple of categories, right? So the first is around delivering a good experience across a variety of devices and bandwidth profiles, really. And the answer is typically server-side ad insertion, where you're now able to stitch the ad into the video stream with the right type of stream, right? You already since you're already delivering the video content, you already know what you really want to be delivering from an ad point of view. Obviously, the challenges around experience continue here. We have to ensure that we deliver the right transcoded stream. Nobody wants to really watch content on a big screen TV and then end up with a pixelated, bad quality ad in the middle, right? So that's bad for both the content owner as well as for the advertiser, for that matter. The next set of challenges are around ensuring that all the needs of the digital ad delivery, all the expectations, I guess, are being met, like things like being able to target users correctly, especially in the absence of cookies. That can be challenging. The expectations from the buy side around being able to measure the delivery of an ad, the viewability of an ad. Those are the kind of things that come up as challenges. And then, of course, you also have challenges around building interactive experiences across a wide variety of device types and ad delivery mechanisms. And I guess the final one I would mention is, as with any space that's lucrative, it's important to protect against fraud too. So that's another challenge too. And we've been working on a number of these challenges. I won't go into any detail right now, but most of the things that I mentioned are handled by a number of standards, and that's, I think, goes back to the importance of standards in the space. Things like vast open measurement and all that, and the OTT IFA guidelines. All those are important to address these challenges, but these are still early days, and so it is important to know that we need to be aware of those challenges and also start thinking about what solves those challenges. Really.
Anybody else? Chris, Dave, Sudhi, what do you guys see as the challenges?
If I could, I'll just add a little bit. Is today we're seeing this huge growth in demand, literally over the past couple of weeks, and sometimes that we can't always predict that. And so it's really important that not only do we have these integrations and standards and that we can provide this flexibility, but we also need solutions at scale that can support reaching the clients you want at the time you need with the content and the advertisements that are most valuable to them.
Yeah, so this is Sudhi. I'll add on to that. I think the scale is a really important point that you brought up. One of the challenges is that digital advertising systems were really built for web ads, impression-oriented ads. Linear is very different, right? So with linear, you have the problem of concurrency, particularly with live streams, and this is a common issue today where when you have a large number of concurrent viewers with personalized ads, ad servers are unable to keep up with those requests for ads. And you do see things like slates show up or just ads don't show up. The other challenge really is how digital ads are set up. You set up as campaigns with certain impression goals. When you have a high number of concurrent viewers that watch video streams, what happens is the ad servers have delivered all the ads they were set up to deliver for that campaign, and they no longer deliver any ads. So viewers are negatively impacted because no ads show up or slates show up. So it's a very poor viewing experience. Some of the other challenges we also see, from Conviva, because Conviva SDKs are integrated across so many publishers, are the developers we work with understand video pretty well, but ad SDKs and ad integrations is something that's still a learning curve for them, particularly when they get into things like client-side and server-side ads, because they do work differently. And server-side ads are actually pretty hard to integrate. You got to think about a lot of things to make server-side ads to work effectively in your video apps.
All right, fantastic. Again, back to my point, right? So this is complicated. When you compare it to a traditional broadcast advertising solution, where to be honest, you might have a box that is doing all of this stuff for you. You've got so many different multiple systems involved in delivering ads into streaming video that it gets super complicated. one of the things I kind of one of the challenges that Amit talked about a little bit is, sort of ad fraud, right? I mean, this is kind of a really new thing for advertising in terms of video, because, how could can you even have fraud in a broadcast advertisement? Not necessarily, right? So, but in streaming with impressions and views and all that stuff, there seems to be an opportunity to defraud, these systems. So, maybe Sudhi, maybe you can, help us understand this a little bit, because, you guys are obviously, leaders in the space of measurement, and especially in terms of the digital video experience. What causes fraud, or where are the big opportunities for fraud? And the sort of follow-on question to that is, would better measurement solve the problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. Fraud is increasingly coming up in the OTT space. Clearly, money is flowing into OTT, and naturally fraud follows where the money is. So it is coming up more and more. In addition to viewability and verification that Amit talked about, fraud is also coming up. That said, I just want to clarify exactly what fraud means. Fraud, in the digital advertising world and now in OTT, is primarily around spoofed impressions, essentially fake viewers that are driving up ad impressions. And related to that is also fake sellers that pretend to be premium publishers so that they can capture some of those advertising dollars. Obviously, the incentive is for the fraudsters to get paid by jacking up the number of fraudulent impressions. And it's more of a problem when it's always existed on the digital advertising side. It's more of a problem when advertisers don't have direct relationships with publishers and primarily buy from resellers or intermediaries like exchanges and certain SSPs. The challenge is that programmatic buyers have few tools today to verify fraudulent impressions, either with the tools that they have in-house or the tools that are available from SSPs. And there's also the question of incentive here. The SSPs make money by selling more impressions, so there's less of an incentive to bring that down by bringing in more verification tools into the ecosystem. That said, among our customers who are premium publishers, it is less of a problem because most of them sell direct via programmatic marketplaces, and their viewers are primarily consuming on video apps. So there's a tighter control on both the viewers as well as how ad inventory is sold. With server side, it does bring up, fraud is coming up in the context of server side today, primarily because it's easier to spoof ad impressions and viewers with server side systems. So there is definitely a potential there. But that said, the MRC still focuses on client side measurement. So, and the closer the measurement is to the viewer, which is, the video app or the browser, the better the chance to catch fraud. So accurate measurement closer to the viewer is really the key to combat fraud as it takes off in OTT.
Oh, that's great. And Dave and Chris, I mean, you guys are dealing with, customers who are implementing, ad systems, in their, streaming video. Do you guys see the same stuff that Sudhi's talking about, or do you guys see different things in terms of fraud?
Yeah, Chris here. I'd echo Sudhi's comments around, while it is a concern that it's kind of relatively new, not you don't have the same kind of concerns in traditional TV. However, with some of our customers that are more the premium publishers, that have a little bit more of control of the inventory, I think it is a little bit less of a concern. I would say I'd lump this into a general category of just getting more tools and transparency around what's happening in the ad insertion process, and being able to track that through your ad requests through all of the hops, whether it's just, you're selling, just out of your ad server, or your ad server is going out and pinging other ad servers on buy side. Just being able to capture and follow that whole kind of routes and ensure there are no issues is really what's needed, tools to help that.
And I can jump in really quickly. Because we sit at the execution layer, we kind of bring together the content, the clients, the ad campaign systems where they're being executed. And one thing we found is that by doing that with server-side ad insertion, where it's in band, where essentially the client's feedback is actually happening on the same path that they're getting the video from, makes it very difficult for something to intervene or to circumvent that. And so from that perspective, we can better protect something that might be out of band or some other external signaling because it's happening directly back to the server you're getting the video from. And so I think that helps the solution. I do want to echo what I'm hearing, which is it's really important that you get insights. The insights that you get on the campaign, the execution of it, the feedback on the verifications is all critical to making sure that that happens. And then there's obviously the need to be able to manage the solution and being able to monitor who's using that solution to be able to detect when this is occurring. So getting all those insights from the execution layer is something we see as important.
And just to add on to that, I had a couple of points. First, I'd like to echo what Chris said about the split between premium publishers and others. I think that right now, OTT especially is at a point where I think majority of the inventory is direct sold. It's not programmatic. And that's the reason why I think the fear of ad fraud has not been too high just yet. But we should be preparing for that future where a lot more inventory is going to be available, a lot more is going to be programmatically sold, and so on. And that's the reason why we are. I think this is something that everyone is aware of, and we're definitely working very hard towards addressing. There are initiatives like appads.txt, which have been very successful on the desktop and mobile front, and we're working with the OTT platforms as well and publishers to make sure that we are able to do the same for OTT CTV devices. That basically, and what that is really just a clear indication of who the sellers are for any given advertiser. The second thing I think, the second initiative that might be interesting for folks is that from an SSAI point of view, the question of you're getting all these signals from a single IP address. That must be fraud. That's the thing that worries people a lot. And there are initiatives like TAG, I think, who are trying to make sure that we have maybe not a whitelist per se, but at least try to have a better way to address. Okay, this is an SSAI vendor, and so let's make sure that those IP addresses are handled a little differently. And then the third part I think is probably a little more tricky. That's around measurement. The MRC, like Sudhi said, requires client-side signals. That gets a little more complicated on CTV devices with such huge fragmentation, right? So that's something that we are looking at. I think everyone's looking at that. I think the ideal case would be something like what we've done in open measurement for mobile, where we have a single shared platform and single shared SDK that people can use across platforms. Maybe it might be more of a SSAI focused solution, but that's something that's also evolving. So figured I'll give a quick view of what I've been seeing from an industry point of view.
Oh, and that's great. And we'll actually return to that in a little bit, Amit, because there's definitely a topic to talk about in regards to all of the moving pieces in ad delivery for streaming video. Right? There's so many systems involved. How do you measure them all? But before we do that, I actually want to talk a little bit about. So, Chris, you made a point, sort of talking about a little bit about that the broadcast TV experience really doesn't have this same kind of problem with fraud that streaming video has, which actually leads to a sort of bigger question. And I think it was Sudhi who might have made the point earlier about delivering ads into linear is difficult, even more difficult, because you're trying to match it to the broadcast. And so that the question I would love for you to sort of chime in first on is, they've talked a lot about in the industry of this kind of parity between broadcast and streaming ads. Is that happening now? Are we really seeing parity all the time, or if we're not, what's keeping that from happening? What are the technical challenges there to sort of providing ad parity?
Yeah, good question. We can probably talk a long time around differences between broadcast and streaming ads. I'll kind of set aside the kind of business issues and how ads are sold and that, and kind of focus on maybe two technical things that have historically been kind of the biggest differentiators. And that's really targeting or addressability and measurement. I think obviously on the targeting front, dynamic ad insertion is really been fantastic for streaming in allowing publishers and advertisers to really get addressability down to the device, and it's given streaming a leg up. But the gap's closing on that. Audience-based targeting, or sometimes called addressable TV, is really becoming more mainstream in TV. It's reaching around 70 million households where the MVPD has presence to do addressability, and obviously with connected TV it starts to get blurred because that has more streaming capabilities. So I think that's starting to become just looked at as table stakes, being able to do targeting across all TV, whether it's kind of from a traditional MVPD or it's on connected TV or streaming. Dynamic ad insertion applies equally to all of those use cases and starting to become more common. Likewise, I think measurement is starting to evolve too. On one hand, it's been pretty established for TV in a while, but pretty nascent for connected TV. But firms like Nielsen, who've been providing agent-generated ratings for TV for many decades, are now extending those capabilities to OTT and to connected TV. So I think the good news is we're progressing on those fronts, and I think that's kind of important for the industry as a whole when we switch from just doing content as a proxy based ad sales down to being able to, across any device that viewers are watching, be able to target them. We're going to need those two things, the dynamic ad search capabilities and the measurements, to be ubiquitous across all platforms, and we're getting there. That's the good news.
Fantastic. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think Chris brought up a really good point here, and I think that's the real key. Leaving technology aside, fundamentally what OTT and digital bring is a different way of selling. It's audience-based selling as opposed to content-based selling, which is what TV is about. So essentially what that means is it requires a different mindset. And today, I think they sort of exist in different worlds, all the way from the TV advertising and OTT digital-based advertising. So how you plan, how you execute, how you measure, they're different across the two worlds. I think OTT has a potential, addressable devices have the potential to bring the two worlds together. And obviously measurement is central to this. Today, Nielsen has a lock on TV-based measurement around households and GRPs. So some of that mindset needs to shift so that the currency becomes less about GRP, but more about the audiences, the targeted audiences that you're reaching. So that transformation is occurring, with better measurement, better education. So I would say that is actually a bigger challenge, the mindset shift that needs to happen.
And let me add really quick that I think there's also flexibility here. When it comes down to it, these large video service providers, they own these subscribers and they own this content, and they're trying to figure out in their sales group, how do they best monetize that? And the way that they've done that traditionally with Nielsen and zone-based advertising through their broadcast gave them reach in certain areas that was very valuable and is still extremely valuable today. But they're wanting flexibility, and they're wanting flexibility to say, on these particular channels, can I go out to the addressable market and sell the impressions on those other channels? In some cases, there are events, and in those times when there's an event, they want to be able to take something that was maybe at a network level or a zone level, and now they want to be able to target more individually. And so you need to have systems that provide that flexibility for them. And I think it's not just a streaming view and a broadcast view and the industry is going to shift all at once. There is going to be this migration where the sales groups within these companies want flexibility, and we need to be able to give them that reach and give them that opportunity.
Oh, very cool. You know, one of the things, so Chris mentioned it, and then, you know, sort of what was followed on kind of talked about it a little bit and you know, at a high level, but it's this sort of addressable advertising, right? I mean, I've heard a lot about this, you know, probably within the past year. I know that there's organizations out there like that, you know, TV manufacturers have started to try to figure out how to do addressable advertising on connected TVs. This concept is really awesome. I know that I saw a demonstration by Sky last year for their AdSmart technology, and basically it was delivering different ads to different people in the same household, like crazy. But I know that this is, you know, the holy grail of advertising, the advertising experience within streaming video. So, you know, Dave, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. You know, just sort of like, what is addressable advertising? I mean, what does that really mean? And then sort of, you know, what are the technical hurdles to making it a reality?
Sure. So what it really comes down to is it allows targeting specific users. And so you address those users. And that allows you to get much higher value for ads that are targeted for those users. And you know, we've actually been doing this for a long time on the internet. You know, so on the internet, your IP address and what you're doing from your browser allows them to target what you're doing when you bought something on Amazon or you're doing some activity. Bringing that to the video streaming has also been done for a while, where we're doing individual ad insertions on those streams based upon the content, the user, perhaps the region, other demographics. What's happening now is we're seeing a much stronger push to bring that into where the biggest reach has been, which is delivery this to video through large operators and even through the broadcast systems. And so bringing that addressability. The technical hurdles for that, I would say, is making sure you have solutions at scale. As I said earlier, there can be very large spikes in demand, especially if you're trying to individually target each user. The ability to tie together these broad ecosystems, so you can connect the advertising agencies and campaign systems with the provider that has the content and their audience of who they're reaching, and making sure that that system works well together, and that, as we said earlier, the monitoring, the execution, the quality of the experience based upon the different types of clients you're trying to reach, whether it's, you know, a large screen TV or a set-top box, or if it's a mobile device that's very weakly connected. And then because you have that variety of clients, you need to be able to offer a service across a large footprint. For example, we had a significant initiative. One of our customers at executive level, they said, oh, we're going to use Apple TV. And so they decided that they're going to do that. And all of a sudden the engineers were like, oh, how do we do that? Because the server-side ad insertion allowed them to tie it to that client and that campaigns and make that happen very seamlessly. They were able to do that in a matter of weeks without having to do a lot of complex development. And so that ability to bring that adapting, scale, and tying together systems is really critical.
Anybody else want to jump into that? I mean, Amit, like, what is the IAB Tech Labs doing to help the industry sort of move to this, you know, to this addressable advertising ideal?
So we've been looking at it. We've definitely been very interested in how things are progressing in here. We figured that the best, we feel like the end result, if you will, of all these different efforts that are going on will be in people landing at where OTT or pure fully connected devices, if you will, are at, right? So smart TVs, connected TVs, and so on. And so we've been really focusing a lot more on that than on broadcast, if you will. But at the same time, we also want to help everybody get to that point. And so we've been involved with a number of efforts where efforts with folks like the ATSC folks, and also there's a project called Project OR, which all of which are doing the blending, if you will, of broadcast and ad insertion. And so we've been helping those efforts by figuring out, okay, how would you use the normal video standards like VAST and all that to make sure that you can dynamically insert ads, that you can actually make those targeted calls and so on. So that's basically been where we've been kind of helping along with the industry there.
Cool. And
Yeah,
Susan,
I would
Chris,
add.
you guys have anything to add there?
Yeah, JT, I would add. I think this is an area that's pretty ripe for maturation in streaming. Obviously with broadcast, there are a number of kind of MOs or kind of operations that are set that we just take for granted, right? Closed captioning, for example, or blackout windows, alternate content, supporting a C3 or C7 window, network DVR, permissions to record or not record programming. All those kind of things that have been baked into traditional MVPD and broadcaster delivery all need to transition over to streaming, right? So I think we're starting to see this, especially as some of the more leading broadcasters start to rebuild their broadcast centers and move to all IP backends. And they're starting to think through, well, how do I get one backend that gives me all these rules for what happens in ad splits between affiliates and the programmers, what happens in C3 windows, all these sorts of rules. How can I have one system that does it for broadcast and does it for streaming? And I think this is an opportunity for us to kind of give best practices with standards, because the ultimate solution may span multiple standards. There may be an element obviously of amidst the V Suite and VAST that's used for ad handling. There may be other elements from SCTE that's used for the signaling. There may be, or for placement opportunity definition. So I think there's opportunity for best practices and a lot of learning there.
Yeah. So this is Siri. Just to add on to, all of these are great points. But essentially the three challenges really are, that how do you instrument dynamic ad insertion? That's where the standard, the signaling, how you encode, the entire workflow is something that needs to be looked at. Also ad decisioning. Now, as you switch from content-based targeting to audience-based targeting, the load on ad decisioning becomes pretty significant now, because you have so many viewers that the systems need to make a decision on which ad to run. And related to that, you need to make sure you have enough number of ad creatives so that the same ad doesn't show up again and again to viewers. So you have to look at it across, all the way from how you instrument it, how you set up your workflows for delivering ads, making sure you have enough demand so that you can actually serve personalized ads, and also obviously measurement, particularly with server side, that becomes a challenge.
I mean, and that makes total sense. It's kind of funny when you mentioned the problem I think that everyone has experienced watching streaming video is, how many times do I have to see this ad? So I mean, that's clearly a problem, but that's an inventory problem, not necessarily a technology one, but still an issue. It's kind of interesting, hearing you guys talk about addressable ads and what potentially could make that happen. I love talking to people about sort of, this transition from, traditional broadcast, like via, SDI and QAM, to this IP-based broadcast where to be honest, the video is now, digital. It can fit into sort of this ultimate flexible piece of software, which is a player. And so it seems to me that there are a lot of opportunities that streaming provides from an ad perspective, from the experience of, you don't have to just sit there and watch it anymore. There could be more going on. Chris, can you sort of lead us off talking a little bit about, what are some of the other, interactive or, ad experience elements that streaming provides that broadcast doesn't, and then sort of, maybe some of the technology challenges of getting there. And just to sort of give you one little thing, I remember seeing about 10 years ago this concept of image tracking in an ad. Like, you could track a Coke can all the way through the ad and it was clickable, and that company went bust. So I'll turn it over to you, Chris. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about some ideas you have.
Yeah, the great thing about streaming and digital is, it could be a lot more flexibility on ad formats, creative, and so forth. I'd also kind of say, hey, the biggest challenge about doing something new with different formats is, can you really get scale on that, right? So I think that's the biggest challenge with doing, for example, interactive ads. Can you get scale across multiple connected TVs, MVPDs, so forth? You really got to align a lot of different folks, and I think that's going to be more of a challenge than the technology. So the technology, yep, capable, maybe there, but getting execution to be the same over everywhere is a challenge. It's one of the benefits of using server-side ad insertion is you can now have kind of control that at a single point, but you still got to deal with what the capabilities are on playback, and those may differ. Although I think, just getting back to Jason, what you mentioned around seeing the same ad everywhere. Ironically, I think one of the things that maybe streaming will, as we start to get dynamic ad insertion rolled out to more platforms, including linear TV, solving that problem could be something that we look at. It's the challenge historically has been each platform has been siloed in terms of ad delivery, and so you really being able to control the reach and frequency across platforms has been extremely hard. But tying, now that you have dynamic ad insertion capabilities, and you can see impressions and track those down to users, that becomes technically a problem that could be solved. So I think that's an exciting one to look forward to.
I'm going to
Anybody want to add to that?
I'm going to be the standards guy and to add to both those points that you made around interactivity and around the frequency capping, right? So frequency capping first, I think that's actually one of the challenges which initially I think the problem was really more about the demand, right? So that if it seemed like the reason why you're seeing a lot of ads repeatedly was because you really had only limited demand for OTT ads, if you will. Now I think that's changing, and now the challenge is more around, okay, especially across multiple publishers, how do you reduce the ad repetition and manage frequency better? So one of the things which I've been recommending everyone to take a look at is the IFA, the Identifier for Advertising Guidelines, that were released about 2 years ago, I think now. And a lot of platforms are implementing that right now, and I think it's still not there yet, but I think that's something that's going to help a lot with that, and that's, I think, key to having a better experience. The second thing is around interactivity. I feel like there's a lot of potential for building really interesting ad experiences, especially with the video streaming. Simid is a spec that we recently released, which allows you to separate out the executable code from the media file, which allows you to build those interesting ads even when you are doing server-side ad insertion. And then the other concept is of interactive templates, which basically allow you to allow the publisher to own the interactive experiences while and the ad itself just contains data, right? So it's a very simple concept, but I think has a lot of potential Both of these are still early on, so I think it's something that is going to help as we go forward with more and more interesting ad experiences.
Anybody else? I mean, Sudhi or Dave, any thoughts about sort of this interactivity and, you know, how do you make it happen?
So I think one, you want to recognize the different user experiences that we're enabling. So when you're focusing on a broadcast experience, that your interactivity is somewhat limited when you're sitting on a couch, sitting back from the screen with the remote. While when you're having a more intelligent device that has more controls, then it makes a lot of sense. And so I think what we see is that really you want to offer this flexibility that can give you the cooperation and seamless usage across those. And I do want to call out the IAB as doing a great job of providing the ability to enable these capabilities for the industry and standardizing how they would be approached.
Yeah, so this is Sudhi. Just to add on to that, interactivity is actually pretty challenging. You know, with client-side ads, you know, we had VPaid, and as Amit mentioned, you know, the CINED and newer standards will be replacing that. But among our customers, we actually see one of the biggest challenges with instrumenting ads, specifically server-side ads, is because they don't want to lose interactivity. They get paid higher for that. Viewers have better experiences. So they go through a lot of shenanigans to make interactive ads. So they switch from a server-inserted ad and then try to play a client-side ad and then try to switch back to a server ad. So it actually creates a lot of challenges, both from an implementation perspective, but specifically from a viewer experience perspective.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. So some of the stuff you guys have talked about, you know, one of the things I want to bring it back around to is this concept of the multi-device experience, right? So again, that's another huge difference between broadcast ads and streaming ads, is now you've got ads everywhere. So it's on your phone, on your connected TV, on your connected device, you know, wherever. And obviously those devices are connected to different networks and they have different requirements. But what we're seeing, I think I don't think anyone disagrees with this, is that there's a ton of video streaming happening on mobile devices. And so, you know, Dave, I wonder if you could sort of start us off with a discussion on this topic. But, you know, are there technical considerations for delivering ads to different platforms, you know, like mobile, which might be on a variable network, such as, you know, LTE and moving to 3G and back again? Or is it, you know, it just sort of treated just like streaming video would be treated? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, first of all, I think the real key here is that we want to take our customers to the easiest solution possible that still gives them flexibility. And the great thing about ABR and some of the standards we were talking about earlier about advertising is that we can do that. So HLS, Dash, VAST, all of these give you the ability to describe something that adapts across these various experiences we're trying to do for the user. One thing that we have as a manifest manipulator server-side ad insertion is we really are aware on a per stream basis what is happening with a client. And so we can adapt the experience to those clients. So in that case, often we're working with our customers saying, you can create ad assets that are a superset across your clients. They can have a broad list of codecs and bit rates and languages and capabilities from the mobile device all the way up to the large device. And then we can tailor those ads to the experience that's currently happening for a given user session. And that may be sometimes selecting between the range of bit rates. It may be selecting something that's appropriate for that client type. So it can be tailored, that ad for one client, and then you can go use that same ad for another client. And so that simplifies their campaigns. The next thing is, often they need ability to manage this. So if they create a large set of profile ladders, being able to define on a device, how do you filter that down to what's appropriate? Sometimes that's because they want a service offering that's different for the large screen TV versus the mobile device, and being able to give them those capabilities. And then the other thing is, you're bringing together all this content, you often have to normalize. So the way you describe a language, maybe Espanol is ES or SPA or SP, right? There's lots of different ways, and so you need to be able to make that easy to bring together those various contents and the desired targeting capability so that it all seamlessly works for the user. And the set-top boxes, which sometimes have very stringent limitations, which are now IP connected, smart TVs, various players, being able to normalize that down to something that helps them all to be able to participate. And so we see that as a key value that we bring, because we can give them a single execution unit that gives them all that flexibility.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that? I mean, it's obviously it's a hot topic, right? So if we have so many more videos being delivered to mobile and video distributors aren't doing what's necessary to make the ad experience good on those devices, that's a problem.
Yeah. So this is Suri. Just to add on, those are obviously the important ones that we just talked about, which is the different bitrate ladders and renditions of creatives. There's a couple of additional things that are technical considerations. The first is that, looking from a viewer perspective, and especially because of variable networks, publishers have to pay attention to whether they should play an ad at all if the network is, doesn't have high capacity or availability at the point. So they need to bring that intelligence into their video applications, actually. And then from a measurement perspective, the other consideration is many times mobile devices, or when the network is bad, go offline. So, advertising is all about measuring ad impressions. So if you're offline, you cannot send impressions back. So you can lose impressions, or the impressions can be delayed. That actually creates havoc for reporting and ultimately for billing. So these are other considerations you really want to think about, with variable networks.
This might be maybe a slightly orthogonal topic, but user agents, I think, is something that we should look at a little more carefully. I feel like as an industry, user agents allow us to get more details about the device, and I think the idea was to be able to send better experiences based on that. But I think as an industry, we've probably used it in a bad way also. I think used it for fingerprinting and other things, and so there have been now conversations about essentially the browser manufacturers taking away the browser vendors taking away the user agent altogether. So that's something that's a discussion that I would recommend everyone take a look at and see where it goes, and also maybe influence the direction it goes in.
Yeah, that's a
nice.
good point.
And actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just echoing what Amit said. It's a really good point. User agent can provide a lot of information that can help tailor streams and experiences to users. But as we look at privacy regulations, does that become one of the things that becomes limited to us? So it's a great thing to keep your finger on the pulse of that.
And it's actually great because it leads right into the next question, which is for, Sudi can start us off with this one. But, we talked a little bit about, the idea of dynamic ad insertion and being able to then, get data on ads delivered down to the individual user and session. And that brings up the bigger question, which is, that a viewer may watch a video across multiple devices, right? The same title at different times. So they start at home, they pause it, they cruise out, they go on their mobile, they continue watching it, they end up at a friend's house, they say like, oh, you got to watch this part, they play it on there. And so now you've got this person, right, moving across different devices, watching the same title, and potentially, let's say there's ads delivered with that title. And now you've got this concept of, say user agents on phones, trying to track sort of what people are doing with ads. Sudi, can you talk a little bit about sort of when ads are integrated with video and you have this scenario happening where users are moving across different devices with potentially the same title, what are the technical challenges of stitching together kind of a holistic view of, that viewer and that title?
Yeah, and that's a great question. In fact, that's probably the biggest question in the industry, right? How do you identify it is the same viewer while being cognizant of all the privacy regulations, that are coming into play, GDPR, CCPA, and you have to do it in a way that whatever you track and measure benefits the viewer, right? So publishers, our customers, are very cautious about the way they're approaching this. So from a technical perspective, I think the biggest challenge, that we are looking at actually right now is how do you create a persistent cross-device identifier so that you can consistently identify a viewer as they move across devices. And traditionally, video and ads actually use different identifiers, right? Videos, when you watch videos on applications, you might use a subscriber ID, maybe another Adobe identifier. But then when you watch ads, you will use IDFA on iOS, or Google Ad ID, or Roku ID for advertising. So the challenge, I think, it really is that there's all these identifiers, and you need to be able to stitch them together so that it actually you have a high confidence that it is the same viewer that is watching all of these content. And many times, IP addresses are used in addition to these identifiers so that you have a model that can help you identify the viewer. That said, privacy regulations and some of the recent industry trends, like for example, cookies are going away. Chrome will phase out cookies in a couple of years. Safari has brought in ITP, so that even first-party cookies, have a limited lifespan. So these are some of the technical challenges, essentially being able to stitch all the identifiers. Now with ads, there's an additional challenge. When you look from an MVPD perspective, as well as those publishers that support their ads with their videos with ads, the so-called AVOD publishers, many times users are not required to log in. So you'll have anonymized identifiers, which becomes an additional challenge when you need to stitch all the identifiers together. And when you have MVPDs, you will insert your own ads, but then you may have your partners and that are providing you videos with their own ads inserted into that stream, which you have no visibility into as an MVPD. So these are some of the challenges we've seen. And as Amit mentioned, as industry initiatives as the IFA can help alleviate some of the identifier-related issues. In our experience, the most effective way to combine all of this data is at the video player, where you can measure both the video that viewers watch, the viewer IDs, the different viewer IDs, and the ads that are watched by the viewer. But obviously, we have to be very cautious in the whole privacy era that we're in.
Yeah, Chris Hock here.
Anybody else?
I'd echo a lot of those comments. I definitely think with the kind of new lens of privacy that many legislative bodies are looking at right now, it's becoming more difficult to do this. I also think, unfortunately, many folks are leveraging IP addresses, which may be not the best mechanism to do this. So I think this is one area where it may actually be becoming more of a challenge to do this rather than less of a challenge as we progress. The way that we look at this at Adobe is this is really what Adobe's bread and butter is all about, is via our Adobe Experience Cloud, being able to help, whether it's someone who's a brand advertiser doing marketing, track a customer journey, or it's a publisher, media and entertainment company delivering content. It's helping them track the entire customer journey and the customer experience, via not only our server-side ad insertion tools that I'm directly involved in, but our other Experience Cloud products, such as our real-time customer data platform for identifying users, or Adobe Audience, or DMP, or Adobe Analytics. But via those tools, what we can do is start to capture unique users, tie them to different devices, on the back end to really simplify that process for media and entertainment customers or for brand advertisers, and then ultimately connect those two. Since we have that user, being able to be that bridge between the brand advertiser and their first party data, of which 193 of the top 200 ad age advertisers have their data in our platform, connect that to the media and entertainment customers.
Great. Great. Okay, so we've got just a few minutes left. I want to make sure that we get to a couple of the questions that have been asked. We won't get to all of them, so I apologize if you ask the question that really requires a more in-depth answer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get that to one of the panelists, and they, hopefully will reach back out to you with an answer. But at least let us get to a couple. So the first one that we have is really directed to you, Amit. The question is, are there any plans at the IAB to develop standards around inserting ad beacon metadata into ad content?
Ad beacon metadata into ad content. Is that well? I guess there are a couple of aspects to that, right? So the first is VAST itself already does have the beacons that need to be fired, and those can be fired right now from the server side as you insert the ad. But I suspect that that's probably not what the question is about. The ideal case, and this is something that we are looking into right now. We are especially talking with some of the folks on the Dash side of the world to see if we can pass that kind of beacon information with the Dash stream so that it actually can be fired from the client side. So yes, we are looking into those things. And I should also say, in fact, when I mentioned open measurement a couple of times, we have actually had implementations of open measurement for SSAI on mobile devices, where the ad is server-side ad inserted, if that's the right term, and then the beacons are fired by the open measurement SDK on the client, with the actual beacon being sent along with the stream. And actually, I don't think it's sent with the stream; it's sent in parallel. So there are different things that we're looking at on that side for sure.
Oh, very cool. All right, and then looks like the other questions we have, and I apologize to anybody who asked questions, are pretty in depth. So I don't think we can do them justice in just 2 minutes, unfortunately. But with that said, if we don't have anything else to add, I just want to thank everybody for attending. Obviously, we're probably all working from home, so it's much easier. But with that said, I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us and our panelists, and I want to thank all of our panelists. Did a fantastic job, and again, we'll get this posted onto the website a little bit later this afternoon. Thanks, guys. Hope everyone enjoyed the webinar.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You all.